Welcome. Thank you for joining us. Today's presentation is going to be about getting ready for that post-grad job search, brought to you by us. Now, without further ado, we'll do a quick introduction. Some of you may or may not notice, the theme for today's presentation is Overcooked. This very, very lovely game about cooking and stress and presentation or preparations and coordination, which makes me feel like this is what kind of job search is kind of about. Here are some goals for today. First of all, we want you all to have a better understanding of what research assistant, lab manager, research coordinator, the title kind of varies, but the bottom line is you're supporting research. And then we want you all to have a better idea for timeline and action steps for a more prepared job search, as well as receive resources on research related job positions. That being said, please note what this workshop is not. It's not applicable for those who are interested in teaching, student affairs, higher education policy, or ed tech like positions. I say this to say, because our lab is within School of Education, I know there's quite a bit of us who are also in the education program. So today's tips might not be 100% applicable, although there are still some transferable tips. This workshop does not go over career development or strategic planning or anything like that. If you have specific questions about your unique situations, we might have to have a follow-up conversation later. And last but not least, this workshop doesn't really go over job search tips regarding social justice issues or supporting particular communities. I added this line in here because I know that as we're job searching, based on our own positionality, there's additional things we need and look for, such as, am I willing to move to this place? Does this place have all the support network I need? Because today's presentation is kind of introductionary and general, we're not going over these specific stuff. With that being said, we'll do a quick introduction of the presenter today. I'll popcorn to Eunice.
Hi, everybody. I'm Eunice. I am one of the lab managers here at the Working Memory and Plasticity Lab. And I went through this whole process of applying to jobs, I think like 2.5 years ago now. So I hope this is helpful, and feel free to reach out to either of us afterwards if you have any more questions. I will popcorn to Susan.
All right. Hey, everyone. I'm Susan. I'm the director of the Working Memory and Plasticity Lab. And in my lab, typically we have at least 2 full-time lab managers at all times. Sometimes we have 3. We had some times where we even had 4. So yeah, and usually people stay between a year, sometimes less and sometimes more. So I have hired and worked with quite a few lab managers.
My name's Ariel. I'm one of the other lab managers. I do have a background in student affairs, so I did a lot of student advising, mentoring, things of that sort. That's why I actually enjoy giving presentations like these. I too also went through the job search process. And the reason why I explicitly said that this is for research-related positions is because I know that different jobs and different fields have different norms or different tips. With that being said, all 3 of us hope that today's presentation could be helpful, as a lot of you might be considering job search during this time. Know that we're rooting for you, like we've said in the flyer. That being said, I had this lovely picture, and I like this picture because it really talks about positionality. So the reason why we had this introduction and kind of talk about the goals and what this presentation is not, is really talk about how oftentimes our positionality and our experiences shapes how we view and see things. That being said, we're sharing with you all everything that we know, but you do have to do the evaluation and the homework to think about, do these tips apply to us? Do they not apply to us? That's some critical thinking you have to do. So don't take what we say today like it's like a concrete instruction. Take what we say today as tips and general suggestions. And just some basic rule of thumb before even going into the tips, you have to do the work. And I say this to say that in my past, I've had a lot of, consulting or advising sessions where I will give student all the resources in hoping that the student will use these resources. A month later, I meet with the student again. I'm like, how's everything? The student goes, oh, I'm really, really stressed. And I was like, okay, did you check out these things I, asked you to check out? And the person's like, oh, I didn't. And I was like, Well, you see, if you check out this first document I send you, it kind of covers everything like we're currently going through and talking about. That being said, we hope that everything we're sharing today with you, you can actually use, aka you actually have to use the resources. And last but not least, being organized always helps. It's just the rule of thumb, and being early in your application, your process also always help. So in quarter system, right now we're in winter quarter, but right now in the semester school, they're already start thinking about job search. One thing I tend to say is I feel like people in quarter system think that they have one more quarter, but in reality, winter quarter and spring quarter kind of like function as an overall semester. So it's a good thing for you all to participate in this workshop. It's also a good thing for you all to start thinking about this early. So I'll keep going. And once again, everything today related is themed after Overcooked. I really like themed presentations because I personally think traditional presentation can be a little boring. So I'm trying to make everything fun. As you may or may not know, when you're cooking, whether or not it's in game or in real life, there's this like outline you have to do, right? You have to do the tutorial, which is when you're looking up, how to actually cook something, or when you are actually in the process of looking up tutorial in the game. There's orders. You receive an order, you have to make and cook. Each order comes with a recipe. And then once you finish cooking, you have to plate them and have a nice presentation. And last but not least, if you play this game, there's an adventure, which means that you have to go through different maps. All of this might seem kind of like out of the blue and strange, but it applies to everything we're about to tell you now. Eunice, I think you're next, right?
Yes. So first off, the tutorial. We compared this to kind of the preparation step of the job search. So when should you be ready for a job search?
This is an interactive section. Please unmute yourself and answer.
Yes, feel free to chime in at any point. So we think you should basically always be ready. And by this, we mean that your resume should always be up to date, and you should be frequently updating it as you have new achievements or new things to add to it. And by doing so, you can kind of reflect on where you are and areas to improve on. And also this would give you enough time to review your resume and also have others give you feedback on it. And before you prepare for the job search, also practice how you want to introduce yourself, because oftentimes the first question that people will ask you in job interviews is, tell me about yourself. So you need to think about what you want people to remember about you. And this is not just repeating your resume word for word, but really giving them something tangible to remember about you.
And here, can you go back? Just two things that I wanted to add here. So one is, why should your resume always be ready? So one is, you might just come by chance across a job opportunity or a job ad that you think, oh, that's actually really a good fit. So that's really something that I would be super interested in. And these jobs, sometimes they're posted and they have a really quick turnaround. So you don't have a whole lot of time to prepare your materials. So that's why you really need to have your stuff ready pretty much at all times. You might only have a day or so to put your things together to apply. That's one thing. The second thing also, in terms of introducing yourself, you're all part of the Working Memory and Plasticity Lab, or almost all of you. So this also has to do with what we call primacy effect. So kind of first impressions. Usually that sticks quite a bit or sticks most with the people who are interviewing you. So this first question, tell me about yourself. This is what people will remember about you almost probably best of all. Of course, people will take notes, but this is what will stick with them. So this is called the primacy effect in memory, which is the reason why people remember it at best. But that's also why you need to prepare to answer this question well. All right. Sorry, Eunice.
No, those are great points. And then before you start looking for jobs, it's always helpful to have informational interviews. And these are essentially kind of Q&A sessions with somebody who is in the job in your area of interest. Because people will tell you this a lot, but it's not just about what you know, but about who you know. So if you're looking for a job in research, kind of like a lab manager position, a good idea would maybe be to ask me and Ariel for an informational interview and ask us about our experience applying for this job. Because people really do want to help you succeed and give you tips and suggestions for success. And this will also help you just be more comfortable with being uncomfortable and nervous, because the interview process, the whole job application process is not that comfortable. So you have to kind of get used to this whole experience. Another big suggestion that we have is to create a professional development journal to keep notes on where you are in this process. And this is not just about like the job search, but also after you have a job, what achievements are you making and what areas of improvement do you notice in your professional development?
And then just to add on that, and I started doing this when I was in grad school because my grad program was very competency focused. That being said, what happened is when I go to different like presentations or different workshops, specifically about jobs, I'll have a job related journal where I would take out notes. And it really helps to have something that's there and keep all the information there. And also I take this journal when I'm interviewing. So I'm kind of jumping ahead. We'll talk about interviewing in a second. But basically what I realize is oftentimes like, and this is pre-pandemic, so it was actually in person. What happened is I'll be sitting there and then people will ask me questions and everyone's taking notes and I'm just like, oh. And then when they ask me questions, sometimes it's like 2-3 parts and there's like very big question. So I find it really challenging for me to think. And I also sometimes heard or like not really complete the questions. So I start taking notes too. And I will be like, all right, well, that's a great question. I'm also just taking notes as we're interviewing because the idea is that they're not only they're interviewing me, I'm also interviewing them. So I'll write down the question and which give me some time to think about how to answer it. I'm also writing it down so I'm not missing any part of the question. And when I answer, by this time I write something down, I feel more confident and have a more coherent answer. And most importantly, after I finish the interview, I already have the question with me. So should I ever want to like review, like what did we talk about in that interview in like thank you letters or follow-up presentations or whatever, I have those notes with me. So it's totally fine for you also take notes during interview sessions. Don't feel like, you're the one who have to sit there and be like, I'm just listening.
Yeah, and always try to stay organized. You can actually just Google a job application tracker and find a template on there. But when you're applying to jobs, it really is a numbers game. And so you will probably end up applying to maybe 30 or 50 jobs, and it becomes really hard to keep track of them. And sometimes after you close the tab with the job description, you can't really find it again. So just keep track of the job descriptions, the job, where you're applying to, what kind of research they do, things like that. And this will also kind of help you realize when to stop, because if you look through your job application tracker and you've already applied to 50 jobs that week, you can kind of say, okay, maybe it's time to take a step back and wait for some of the labs to get back to me.
And here, I just wanted to add something important as well. So, I mean, this is super helpful with the job application tracker. So don't just also post the link in there. So I applied for this job, because often these job description will be gone after a day or 2 or 3, and you don't have access to it anymore. So if you get an interview and they ask you, well, why did you apply for that job? You should prepare ideally beforehand, and you can't access this job description anymore because it might be gone. So it's a good habit to just take a screenshot or download the job description and put that in your folder and your files, so you can actually remember what the job was about, because that happens quite often, that they take them down before you can actually make a record.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then also, people talk about this all the time as well, but just keep your online presence clean, or at least kind of give it a glow up, because it is very possible that your potential employer might look you up on Google and find your social media account. So just make sure that it's something that you would be okay with them seeing. And finally, when you're preparing for the job search, reflect upon yourself and ask yourself these questions. So who am I and what are my strengths? Identify your mentor or goal. So is there somebody who I want to become like? Are there certain things I want to accomplish? And also think about what experiences or skills do I need to bridge the gaps currently in my experiences.
And just to chime in on that, this is especially helpful for those who are like second, third year, like rising junior and seniors, because once you identify who you want to become, it kind of helps you. When I say become, like don't be that person completely. Obviously, you can still be who you are. But if once you kind of figure out your goal, you can then think about what are the resources I have and how to like kind of go through that goal. When in doubt, you can always look up like job descriptions of lab managers, research assistant, or just like ask me and Eunice about, okay, so where am I, and then what are the skills I need to build in the next couple quarters so that I'll be ready for, you know, whether or not it's grad school or, you know, full-time position afterwards and all that good stuff.
Okay, and then the next step is getting the orders. So we compare this to job descriptions because the orders tell you what food that the customers want, and the job description tells us what are these labs looking for and what do you need to put in your resume to stand out. So job descriptions will typically tell you the responsibilities of the job and the day-to-day things that you'll be doing, as well as a list of the skills and qualifications that they're looking for. One thing I want to note is that say they list maybe 10 qualifications or skills they're looking for and you only meet maybe 8 or 9 of them, I would say still apply because oftentimes it's not a hard and fast rule and they want somebody who's willing to learn. If you only meet maybe like 2 or 3 of them, that might be a sign that maybe this is not the best fit for you. But if it's really just a few skills that you're not really meeting all the way, I would say still give it a chance. And the job description will tell you the high frequency words that you need to include in your resume. If a job's description really highlights, say, data analysis or recruitment skills, things like that, you know that this lab is specifically looking for somebody who has experience in these areas. So what you want to do is something called positional alignment, which is really making your resume tailored to those keywords and highlighting these areas where your experiences align with the ones that the job description is looking for.
And I also want to just highlight one thing, and this is like more of those like hidden knowledge. And it varies like by lab as well as the institution. So most of the lab position that you'll be applying will have a portal attached to the institution. So when I apply for this job, I'm not just like sending Susan resume, I'm sending my resume into the UCI job career portal, and that'll kind of pass through and process all that good stuff. What you all need to know is something called application tracking system, which is ATS for short. A lot of institutions, what happened, and when I say institution is like literally like the HR of the institution, they receive a lot of applications, and sometimes it's really hard for them to go through everything manually. So they rely on these ATS tracker to go through the application. What happened is these are basically just computational linguistic stuff where they will check out the words in your application and match in your like job description. So say if, you know, if like using the Eunice example, say if this application talks or this description talks a lot about data, and there's like nowhere where your in terms of frequency, your resume only mentioned data once, or like, and then have like one reference to data analysis, chances are the ATS will consider your application as not qualified and just filter you out. So what I'm saying is before you even reach to a hiring manager or a person, your resume is not filtered out. And this is even more common in corporate. So if you're applying for research positions in like the private sector, is even more common. That being said, one way for you to like, you know, get your resume passed is to study those high frequency words and kind of, you know, think about ways that you can phrase your experience in alignment to what you're looking for in the position. All right, so now the order is up. And as you remembered, I said you receive your order in the game and you also receive a recipe. So recipe is really similar to like resume and CV, as well as cover letter. And basically the point is, how do I convey my qualifications on the paper? So in terms of resume, you have to match your resume to the position. And please note that we'll talk about the difference between resume and CV in a second. So right here, we're just talking about resume. So make sure you're matching your resumes to the position. Susan can probably chime in later on about like as a hiring person if you prefer CV or resume. And then when you're writing a resume, think about transferable skills. So earlier on, Eunice mentioned that even if a position has like all these qualifications that you don't think you have, you should still apply. Similarly, say if you did this position have you don't have exact same experience on analyzing this data, using this program, but you can think of some transferable skills you've learned from different class that you're able to kind of pick up on while you're helping out with different projects. And the key is you want to prioritize the skills as well as experiences that this lab's research interest as well as the job description aligns. You want to highlight the accomplishment that you had, and you don't want to repeat yourself. So what I mean is, say if you have you are involved in 3 different projects and all project does quote unquote data collection. You don't want to say helping with data collection 3 times, because in a way there's a waste of the room on your paper because you're not providing any new information that highlight your skills. And also make sure your resume is PDF. I think this is very important because oftentimes when you send in Word doc, it mess up the what you call them again? They mess up the format. And then make sure that your resume looks clean, organized, and error-free. And this happens a lot in the sense that sometimes the content might be good, but it looks really disorganized. So the person who's reading it already have a bad impression of this resume because it's really disorganized. And also make sure to save your resume under your name, because there's a lot of times when we get stuff that's saved under things like CV template or student CV template, which is really problematic because once we download it, you don't want to make it extra work for people to try to find who you are. You want to make sure people can actually locate Eunice's resume as soon as they download it.
Yeah, so a concrete example. So the other day we had an ad for volunteers and RAs in our lab. Indeed, we had about 120 or so applicants. And then we put all the resumes in a folder, and we had 30 resumes, which were just called resume. So we couldn't know who these resumes belonged to, which was, of course, very annoying for all of us who wanted to kind of look at, oh yeah, I wanted to get the resume of this person. And then you had to open each file to find this person's resume. So just as a concrete example.
And then right here, we just want to quickly touch upon the difference between resume versus CV. So as you all probably know, resumes, at least in the context of US, because I know that in the EU, they do something different. In the context of US, resume oftentimes is commonly used for jobs or applying for different jobs, and it's really 1 pages. CV oftentimes is geared towards academia, and you can be more than 2 pages. Resume kind of highlights your skills and qualifications, whereas CV highlights your academic research interests, as well as your publication, accomplishment, all that good stuff. So for me, I have a CV that includes my publication and my presentation, and it's pretty long, but I also have a 1-pager resume that really only talks about my research experience, like a resume would. My understanding it is up to the discretion of the lab on which one they prefer. Oftentimes on the actual application, they will say submit your resume or CV. And then if they gave me the option to submit CV, I will submit CV just because it kind of highlights my ability to write and present as well. But if they do ask for a resume, I would recommend submit a 1-page CV or resume and don't do the other way, because again, you want to make sure you're following their instruction. You want to follow their norm. Susan, do you want to chime in a bit?
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight too. So the resume, as you, Ariel, already alluded to a little bit. So the resume is maybe even more targeted to each individual job. So applying for job is a lot of work because you really want to make sure that your resume, which is this 1-pager, is really tailored towards the job that you're applying. The CV can still be tailored, but since some of the academic achievements that you had are going to remain the same, so that's maybe a little bit less work to kind of change things, but still try to do as much as possible. So these are maybe some of the differences to keep in mind. But in general, that's why job searching is a lot of work. So you really have to make sure that it's tailored to each application.
Mm-hmm. And then one other thing I feel like people don't talk about is this concept of telling a story. So you want to tell a story in your resume when you write it. So you want to focus on the accomplishment and not just tasks, because everyone can enter data. But what you want to highlight is, what did you do that's really helpful? Like how have you entered this data, and how has this data helped the accomplishment of this program, et cetera, et cetera. You want to use action, verb, and quantity. You also want to use words that provide a feeling and describe the scope. And I'll give you all an example in a second. When I say feeling, I'm not saying like emotional words. I'm saying words that makes people to understand like, oh, this must have been a really, really important project. And then I have this formula. I'm going to trademark it one day. I say this all the time. It's been 2 years, still haven't started my application process. But what I do is I use an action verb, and I will describe the project, and I will then talk about the result. So for example, one of the really common things that people do put it on a resume a lot is complete annual reports for review. And this is an actual example. And then how I would write this, which is what I did, is something like this. So I say I initiated. So initiate is both an action verb, and it's also a word that provides feeling, because it shows that I take initiative. It implies that I thought it through, I planned, I proposed. Departmental is also a good word that describes the scope, because then when people read it, they kind of understand like, oh, okay, so it's not just like a small report. It's pretty big because it's departmental. So I initiated departmental analyses and developed executive summaries. So the gray out word are not that impressive in my opinion. For educational benchmark Inc. So basically what happened in my case is we outsourced our report to this organization or this software, but they didn't provide us a report that we want. So I took what the data they collected and did analyses. And the reason why I included this is by the time that people finish reading Educational Benchmarking Inc. annual survey, annual maintenance report, and new student orientation evaluation, they have an idea of what I actually did. So because now I'm providing a scope, I'm providing my actual action, but I'm also telling people exactly what I did. And hopefully by the time that people finish this part, they're like, okay, this person knows what they're talking about for the department. And then I include one sentence as result were utilized for development and improvement for department initiative, blah, blah, blah. Now this one, oh, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
Yeah, so just want to give a contrast here. So what you then sometimes see in CVs instead, which makes much less of an impression, is if someone would write, oh, I helped with reports, which is not an exaggeration. That's what you see often. And you say, you don't really get a sense of what this person actually did. And it also doesn't show this initiative that Ariel was mentioning and kind of the leadership that she took there and the ownership that she's taking in doing this work. So try to avoid some of these kind of nondescript verbs like helping with, and there's a few of these words that you can always Google kind of what not to use, what's not helpful. So this is one.
And this is actually, this is also an example of how you can highlight your transferable skills. So this description was from a job that's nothing like research related. It was from my previous job in higher ed. But when I applied for this job, the thought process is like, okay, I want to showcase that I understand how to extract data. I want to showcase I know how to analyze, and I can produce reports, which from my understanding was a really important thing for this position. So you can still talk about experiences that are not directly aligned, as long as you can tell the story and make it relatable. Here are some other examples in terms of the action plus project plus result formula. The second one is also the one that actually included in my resume when I applied for this job. So I say propose and design a quantitative study investigating. Here is basically the research goal, but then I specifically said that I use JavaScript and project implicit platform, and I conduct literature reviews and prepare IRB application for approval. So in this particular case, is less quote unquote fluffy as the one I just shared, but it's directly related to my understanding of this position, trying to kind of quote unquote impress Susan when she reads it, that I know what's an IRB and I know what this position kind of entails. Any questions so far? This is usually if I'm in person, I'll kind of like look at everyone's face to see if everybody's confused. I'll also take a look to make sure everyone's taking notes, but now about half of us have our face off. So it's really hard for me to do that. And then in the case that you don't actually know how to qualify your experience, which happen more often than not, like you're like, I know what I did, but how do I tell people what do I do? You can refer to the job description itself and the requirement or some sample resume and borrow their languages. That's completely fine. That's totally fine. And you can also check out public CV and resume from lab websites. Another keyword, the lab website. So when you're applying for a job, make sure to do your homework beforehand to actually look up to see what are they doing, you know, who is in the lab. And if they do have like public CVs where people like do actually share CVs, you can check it out so you can have a better understanding of who you might be interviewing with. And don't plagiarize, but it's okay to refer to, you know, their experiences as, okay, so this is how they kind of qualify their experience. And maybe this is kind of how I can, you know, change up my words as well. And then
can you go one back? Sorry,
yes.
real quick. And you can even take it a step further and people will not be annoyed with you. You can even reach out. So in that example, Ariel could have reached out to me by email and say, oh, I saw this job. I'm really excited about this. I wanted to let you know that I'm going to apply for it. Here is my CV, just to give you an idea or something like that. So that's totally fine to reach out to people. And ask whether, they already might have some questions. They might not respond to you necessarily or something nondescript, but that also already gives you a little bit of a first kind of that they notice when they then go back to the application pool. I will remember, oh yeah, Ariel, she emailed me earlier, so I'm going to look out for her CV because it sounded really good.
And the last part of our resume is in most RA and lab manager positions, there are some things you want to highlight because, again, Susan, correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding is RA and lab manager positions oftentimes designed with the understanding that these are the people who are interested in doing research and, you know, 80-70% of them might be applying for grad school in the long run. And as such, these positions are also designed to support the research work within the lab. So the couple of things I do want to highlight is your project management skills, your administrative administrative skills. And I always say this to my RA, I understand admin work is very busy and annoying and frustrating and boring, but it's very important because admins get what gets things going. You know, emails will get things going, IRB approvals get what things going, etc. Data collection, management analysis are always helpful. Your ability to do experiences through literature review, and just previous projects you led. I think that means that you've led is very important because you want to tell people that you have the ability to lead a project, to manage a project. Suzanne, is there something you want to say? Because I heard a sound from you.
Yeah, no, this is a great list. I mean, in addition, so if you can highlight any kind of potential leadership experience that you might have had. So for example, leading a project with other RAs, for example, that you did, or a project a Euro project, for example, that you did with a group together. So any kind of, or even outside of academia, if you led a youth group to do X, Y, and Z. So leadership experience is always something that's seen as in a very positive way. And then you also want to see, ideally when you do your homework, so what's the population that you're supposed to work with? So if it is about older adults, for example, or kids with ADHD, if you can highlight anything that would suggest to the people you're applying for that you have some transferable skills or some experience with this relevant population, that's always helpful as well.
Right, next is cover letter. So cover letter is what I consider the personality letter. And then this is a line that I actually use in my cover letter. And I think it works out pretty well, is what I will emphasize what my resume doesn't tell you. Because resume, so you don't want to repeat yourself in your cover letter, because the idea is, okay, well then what's the difference between cover letter? So say if I describe this project I've done in my resume, in my cover letter, I'll tell the story behind it. Oh, you know, I was really curious about this and I'm going through this career transition. I'm I'm showing out my passion by doing this, and I initiated and I'll start propose this study, etc. You can also use this as an opportunity to highlight transferable skills, just like Susan said, and then make references and connections, right? Like, I was really interested in you're in this lab because X, Y, and Z, or like we crossed our path in X, Y, and Z conference. And you also want to tell people how you have accomplished things, because I might be talking about it in my accomplishment that, I did this report, but in the cover letter is where I can really talk about, okay, so the situation was that it was kind of difficult, it was kind of messy, so I had to talk to 50 different departments, which then showcase my communication skills. And this is the part where I will say this, even though I don't want to say it, is so say if they don't require cover letter, but it's like cover letter optional or recommended or whatever, you still want to submit a cover letter, because the idea is you want to do the work so you're not being overlooked on the basis of a cover letter. The way I describe to people is, I know that GRE is optional in grad school, but I'm going to take the GRE anyways because I don't want to be overlooked because I don't have a GRE score. I know it's very sad, but this is kind of my approach to it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it seems to be changing a little bit in corporate, that cover letters are less and less maybe also required. And I don't know what happens if you still submit one, but I think in academia, it's still definitely something that you wanna write and add, because it also shows that you did the homework, that you kind of really know what you're applying to, because those are often quite revealing as well. So I would also recommend making it a habit of writing one.
And then, so now we got our order, we finish our order, we cook up our little order, and now we have to plate them, because it's about presentation. Plating is about presentation. To present or to impress? The answer is both. The reason why I put out this question is oftentimes you have this discussion about like, okay, am I exaggerating or am I not exaggerating? How should I showcasing myself? Do I look too eager? Blah, 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 blah. And the answer is always like cooking is the art. So it's both. You want to present who you are and present information, but there's also a little bit of personality that you want to do. You do want to impress others, or at least leave some of an impression, so you're not forgotten. You know what I mean? So lots of mock interviews and feedback. Like Eunice said earlier, practice always helps to reduce your nervousness. You'll be nervous, but the more you practice, hopefully the less nervous you'll become. And then it also becomes more natural. So if you have practiced talking about yourself a lot, then it becomes more natural, because oftentimes, practice do give us a level of confidence and familiarity. And then when I say get feedback, there's two types of interviews practice you can do. You can either actually get a friend and do mock interview. You can also just practice with yourself in the mirrors / recording. Either way works, but the bottom line is sometimes when we talk, and I'm a big problemer. I'm a big person when it comes to this. Sometimes when you talk, you can talk too fast. You can talk not clear. You can move too much, like I'm doing right now. So having these external feedback really help you to kind of think about how you want to deliver your presentation. One of the biggest feedback I actually got was one time I was practicing with someone, and then the person was like, Ariel, everything is great, but talking to you make me nervous because you talk so fast, which I also realized I'm probably doing it right now. So that being said, lots of mock interviews and get some feedback. And this is my special flashcard method. One of the other things I'll trademark one of these days. So this is a screenshot of Quizlet, and you can probably see the first question was, tell me about yourself. And bam, there's my little bio right there. So what I did, and this is more so when I was in grad school, what I did is I will make this little flashcard about the commonly asked questions. And on the way back I went to grad school in New York. On the way back from school, I will sit there because there's nothing to do on the train. You're just like, flip, tell me about yourself, and I'll kind of practice, and I'll come back, I'll flip back. It's like, okay, so here are some points I highlight. Sometimes people think preparing for an interview means you're memorizing everything, which makes it more nervous for you and just like unnatural. So for me, what I realized, do this flashcard method helped me in making me more comfortable in sharing some of these qualities, because I just remembered. And you just flow better too. Another tip is answer behavioral question using the STAR method. So the STAR method says you should answer a question in like 4 sentences, and these 4 sentences kind of shape like this. You want to talk about the situation. So let me back up a little bit. A lot of the question you're going to get is considered a behavioral question. So tell me a time when you deal with a difficult situation, or they'll provide a situation for you to analyze. If you are in this situation, here are some scenarios, how would you react to it? But either way, you can answer with the STAR method by first talk about the situation. So describe the event, the situation that you're in. You want to talk about the task you did. It's like, okay, so I was in a situation where, I had to handle a really unsatisfying customer, and the task I was assigned is to make sure that she move out of the way and can continue processing order. And then the action you took is like, okay, so after realizing that she's not gonna be happy with X, Y, and Z, so I took the leadership role and here's what I did, and talk about the results. Okay, and then in the end, the problem was solved, and I also bring this feedback to the manager, and we came in with this new ordering system, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm thinking I'm working in the food service because overcook. But that's an example of how you can answer a question completely, because then you're not only answering the first half of the question, you're also showcasing who you are. And then always prepare a few questions to ask back. The key about asking questions during an interview is you want to get additional information. You also want to share that you know the information. And here are some common questions you can ask. So what does success look like for this role in your department or your lab? What's the current challenge you're trying to resolve? What's your favorite part of this job? Are there anything you'd like me to clarify? What's the timeline, etc., etc.? Susan, is there anything you want to add? Because I feel like you wanted to talk.
No. So these are definitely super helpful things. So always have a few questions that you can ask in the end, because invariably at the end you will be asked, are there any questions for us? And it doesn't really leave a very good impression on the applicants if they say, oh no, I know everything, and then they leave, right? Because there's always things that you can kind of ask for sure. Yes, so prepare a few of them. And even if you just want to go back, if you think, oh, they have covered all of these, you can always go back and say, oh, can you go back to this question or this thing that we discussed earlier? Can you clarify a little bit more? So that's why having something to take notes will help you do that.
All right. And next, we have mapping. So this is the part where I want to share resources with you. What is out here? And this is the moment I would really, really encourage you all to actually write them down or take a picture or something. The reason why I say this, and I do this presentation a lot, is I realize students no longer take notes. They just expect us to send everything, which we will, but it also shows a great initiative if you can take notes on these lovely resources that we have. So the first one is you should go to a university website and sign up for the job alert, because that's kind of how a lot of university affiliated job positions are being posted. Eunice, did you want to talk about the second one?
Oh, the listserv or
the undergrad psychology Harvard one that you shared?
Oh, that's just a link on the Harvard psychology page where they list postgrad jobs that are available, and it's still being updated. I saw updates yesterday. They're mostly for more clinical psychology jobs, but that's a really good research that I looked at when I was applying.
And then the next type of resources is listservs. So there are the two that I'm subscribed to. If you are a member of the different subdivision within APA, you don't have to actually be a paid member. But if you are a member of the subdivision, you can also subscribe to their newsletter. So I'm part of Division 45. That one's about culture, race, society, things like that. The reason why I didn't include that is because APA has 100 subdivisions, but just FYI. And then these two right here, one of them is called Develop Society, the other one is Cognitive Science Society. So the way that listserv works, maybe it's a generational thing, is you subscribe and then you just get this mass email from someone, oftentimes from one person. So it's not like a newsletter, is where you are the recipient of all these additional things. And that's where I got a lot of my job posting that I post Slack in from. And there are all these job listing sites, and these are specific to psychology, because these are the most amount of resources that I utilize, because both Eunice and I have a psychology background. So that's probably why we're more more affinited with psychology related job search sites, and I'm sure that Susan can share more about CogSci too.
Yeah, I just shared another one in the chat. And what you
that.
can also do is, if you are, let's say you're constrained to a specific location, let's say you want to remain in SoCal, you can go to the web pages to the universities around and go directly on their own job websites and look very specifically. There it's sometimes a little bit hard because sometimes these could be a little bit more nondescript and you don't know exactly what it is, but that's always useful. So go to all UCs, go to USC, go to wherever it's close, the CSUs, and check some specific website directly at the institutions as well.
And then last but not least, social media is also a big one. Yes. So academia is very active on Twitter, to a point that I had to make a Twitter just for this, even though I have not yet looked at it for a very long time. But that being said, Psych Chatter, it is great resources that every single month they literally post a tweet that includes all the like jobs related to like psychology. I'm looking for a research assistant, I'm looking for a lab manager, all of that. Great people. And if you just go to psych jobs on Twitter, there's also a bunch of like jobs that people are posting. And this is the part that's kind of tricky because, you know, there's a lot going on. What's probably works the best for you is for you to kind of go around all these sites and kind of figure out, you know, what works the best for you. That's also why in the beginning I said like, okay, we have our positionality. So, you know, if this way works best for you, you can stick with that way. And then here are some other resources. And notice how the first two things are in all cap is go to your university's career center. It's very, very important for you to utilize resources. All of you are paying a lot of money for UCI, I think. Are we all UCI? I think. A lot of you are paying a lot of money for UCI. A part of the student fees goes to Career Center. So if you're not using the Career Center resources, you are losing your money in a way. I'm just saying. I did a whole analysis on UC tuition. We can have a chat later on. That being said, go to your Career Service Center and make an appointment for resume review. It's very, very important because the amount of people who don't use university resources is a lot. And then right here, we're just on website. So Berkeley's Career Center had these great like website with just like mountains and oceans of resources, and they're all free for access. The second one, I realized that is kind of hard. So this is a person who basically posted a bunch of like tips and templates on how you can answer some questions, how you can write cover letters, all that good stuff. The third one, Kirsten Muirhouse. So this is a guide on grad school, applying for psychology related grad schools, but it has a whole section about what can you do in your gap year. And that gap year section applies to how you're looking for research. And last but not least, same shameless plug, there's also my website where I also posted resources about like CVs, informational interview in the research section. So that concludes all the materials and presentation.